Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Hungary. Formula One is in Budapest this weekend for the 13th round of the season. Just one more to go next week in Belgium before we reach the summer break. Cloudier conditions today at the Hungarian with a bit of light wind too. We're just 12 miles northeast of Budapest. A track with a mix of low and medium speed corners, sharp changes of direction with 14 corners, 6 to the left and 8 to the right. Another challenge then for the 20 drivers who take to the field, and ahead of us this afternoon, the last practice session before we head into qualifying later on. My name is Harry Benjamin, and alongside me, guiding you through all the coverage this weekend, is the former McLaren F1 mechanic Mark Priestley. Mark, we're almost at that summer break. There are still at least 6 seats up for grabs for next year. McLaren seem to be mounting a challenge for the Constructors' Championship along with Ferrari. Mercedes are off the back of 2 wins on the trot. Sergio Perez signed a contract extension with Red Bull, but now it seems like rumours are mounting that he might not see past the end of this season. 6 different winners in the first 12 races this year. Max Verstappen hasn't won a race since Spain, still leads the championship. What's going on in Formula One at the moment?
Well, apart from all that, there's not a lot happening here, is it? It's crazy. I love it. This is absolute peak Formula One, I think. What's happening on track is amazing. We're going into every weekend right now not knowing who's going to come out on top. That's brilliant. We've been crying out for that for years. But even off track, as you said, there is so many different storylines. And again, we don't know how they're going to play out. The driver market is one of the sort of most topsy-turvy we've seen in many, many years. And still, even at this point, even though it started way back at the beginning of the year with Lewis Hamilton's shock announcement he's going to Ferrari, even now we still don't know where quite a few of those drivers are going to end up, and we can get into that as the session goes on, but there is so much still to play out this year, and I think that's just so exciting. You cannot turn away from this season of Formula One.
Absolutely, yeah, it has been an absolute scorcher so far this weekend, although we've had quite torrential rain towards the start of the weekend. Cloudy conditions, as I said today, though, the air temperature just over 26 degrees Celsius, track temperature just under 40 degrees Celsius. Also joining us this weekend is the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Andrew, 2 practice sessions down, 1 to go. What have you learned so far?
Well, it's a lot cooler today, Harry. It's 26 degrees, which is 5 or so degrees cooler than it was yesterday, and it's got cloud cover. That's going to make a big difference to the track temperature, as you said, and that might bring Mercedes more into the picture. I was having a quick chat with George Russell this morning. He was saying he thinks they're still probably a tenth or 2 off McLaren and Red Bull around this track, but both he and Lewis Hamilton yesterday were saying that that car doesn't like the hot temperatures, so this could help them on qualifying day, although it's supposed to be really hot again for the Grand Prix. We don't have a definitive read yet on the big upgrade that Red Bull have brought, and Aston Martin, who are another team, have a big upgrade. Lance Stroll gave one of his sort of classic monosyllabic grumpy TV interviews yesterday. Probably wasn't the worst he's ever done, but it was in the ballpark. Fernando Alonso, though, seems a bit happier with that car, so there's someone to keep an eye on as well, at sort of lower end of the top 10.
Yeah, they were running back-to-backs, weren't they, in FP1 before Stroll then took on the upgrade. Andrew, I just have to ask you as well, yesterday we were looking at the long run pace, and Sergio Perez in the Red Bull seemed to be faster than Max Verstappen on the long runs. Do we know anything more about that? I know at the time you weren't really convinced about the data, but we've had a night to sleep on it. Have you had any further thoughts on that?
Well, never mind me. I know some rival teams are not very convinced by the data either. Some of them would say, well, Perez is quicker than Verstappen, so there must be something wrong there. Look, I think Perez was definitely happier, in a happier place yesterday than he has been recently, but then he also pointed out that he was confident on Friday at Silverstone, and then his weekend fell apart. I don't think anyone in the world expects him to be quicker than Max Verstappen, especially around this sort of demanding track. It's not a street circuit where Verstappen's preferences do not lie. It's very much a road circuit with a blend of low, medium and high-speed corners. So I'm sure there was some kind of anomaly there. Red Bull are not known for revealing their technical secrets, though. So I don't think we're going to find out what that anomaly was, but I wouldn't expect Perez to be ahead of Verstappen But in terms of Perez's pace, a rival team said it would be, in fact it was George Russell, if I remember rightly, said it would be a surprise maybe to see Perez up there.
Well, we'll keep a track of that throughout this final free practice session. The last one, of course, before we head to qualifying later on. For those who wish to do a sync-up, the green light has come on at the end of the pit lane. Nobody is rushing to get out, though, but I'll give you the sync anyway. It's 59 minutes and 39 seconds remain, and on cue, a Sauber emerges from the garage and heads out onto the track. The fluoro green liveried Sauber of Joe Guan Yu, who nearly had a mighty incident yesterday, spinning round and round out of the fast uphill blind left-hander of turn 4 and just avoided taking Sergio Perez out. And Perez is indeed the next driver that follows him out. Perez doing a decent act of avoiding Joe, looking at the Sauber in his mirrors and able to just slam on the brakes before a collision between the two. Charles Leclerc was not so lucky a little bit before that in practice too. He had a big incident yesterday and spinning out from turn 4 and actually clouting the wall. And Mark, I mean, it was a big incident to look at it. It didn't look like there was actually that much damage to the car. The rear took a hit, so did the front wing. But how does that affect the team and the driver going forward into the final practice session, obviously, because he missed, I think, over about 40 minutes of running yesterday.
Yeah, and that's the biggest hit. You know, that's the biggest hit from both the driver and the team perspective. The team are desperate to try and collect as much data as they can. They're trying to fight back Ferrari, haven't they? They lost their way slightly in recent times, sort of wound back on an update that it brought to recent races because it hasn't worked out the way they thought. So they desperately need track time and they need clear data to understand the direction they need to go in. They're seeing teams like McLaren, now even Mercedes, and of course Red Bull, who are almost disappearing into the distance, and so that track time and data is so valuable to them. So to lose that was huge, but also from Charles Leclerc's point of view, exactly the same thing. That's how you start your weekend, and to lose a session effectively, to be on the back foot as you then go into the really crucial parts of the weekend, just means you're a step behind everybody else, and it has this knock-on effect. Of course the best drivers can overcome it, and that's what you have to do, but it's a psychological challenge, and when you're in a fight with those teams around you who all seem to be having better, cleaner weekends, that makes it even harder.
It's interesting about Ferrari at the moment. We're actually just seeing a graphic on the screen which showcases since the beginning of the year how all the other teams have gained and lost time compared to Red Bull. Ferrari have lost ground to Red Bull, and that is noticeable. They had an upgrade a couple of races ago which hasn't gone quite the right way. We've seen this reintroduction almost of bouncing on both cars. Charles Leclerc has only scored 12 points in the last 4 races since that spectacular Monaco win. And it does highlight, okay, the on-track racing is obviously crucial, but it's that off-track development war that is just as vital in this modern age of Formula One.
Well, and especially now towards the end of what's been a relatively stable regulation cycle, the rules don't change between this year, the technical rules don't change between this year and next year, so everything that's learnt is valuable going into next season as well. So it's not like you're going to switch your focus onto next year's car, which might be a completely different ethos or philosophy of design. You've got to keep this development going, and the race now is all in the factories. It's all in this development battle between the top 4 or 5 teams, and I think what highlights Ferrari's problem right now is not necessarily that Red Bull have taken a giant leap forward from Ferrari, it's that others have taken a step closer to Red Bull where Ferrari haven't. It is the likes of Mercedes and it's the likes of McLaren that are doing a better job right now, so they need to catch up.
First lap time on the board for Sergio Perez. It's a 1:19.159. He's out there on the hard tyre. Both Saubers went out and then went straight back into the pits. Stroll, Alonso, Verstappen, Piastri and Norris are all out there on the hard tyre as well. Verstappen currently on a quick lap coming through the middle sector. Let's just bring you up to speed with the state of play in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship. In the Drivers', it is Max Verstappen who leads with 255 points to his name. That is 84 more than Lando Norris, who sits in second ahead of the 2 Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. Piastri rounds out the top 5 with Sergio Perez falling down to 6th. And over in the Constructors' Championship, it is Red Bull who lead the way. 373 points to their name, 71 clear of Ferrari, and then McLaren are only 7 points now behind Ferrari. Mercedes 4th, Aston Martin rounding out the top 5, and then now there's a really nice fight developing in that lower half of the field. The battle for 6th in the Constructors between RB and Haas is heating up nicely thanks to Haas's back-to-back point-scoring finishes. Nico Hülkenberg getting 2 6th-place finishes in Austria and then again in Silverstone. That means they're only 4 points now behind RB. Then comes Alpine and Williams. Sauber 10th and last, the only team still to get off the mark with 0 points on the board. 54 minutes and 44 seconds remain. Verstappen is now fastest. Only the Red Bulls have set a lap time. Verstappen's is a 1:18.897. Both out there on the hard tyre. Just over 2.5 tenths between the two Red Bulls. Now, Mark, this is actually the first time you're joining us for the weekend, so let's get stuck into it, because we've spoken a lot already about Sergio Perez and Red Bull and that mounting pressure on Perez despite having that contract extension announced a few weeks ago. How is Perez's mindset affecting that of his team as well? Because it's surely a lot to take. He's had the media scrutiny before, but he's in a slump. This one seems to be lasting longer than any of his other slumps have. And at the moment, there's all these talks of, is there a performance clause in his contract? If he falls further than 100 points by the halfway mark of the season, they have an opportunity to get him out of the seat, which it looks like he will be 100 points behind. It's a really tricky situation, not just for Perez, but for Red Bull too.
Yeah, so to go back to your first point, how does it affect mindset of both him and the team? I mean, terribly is the answer, because when you're an elite sportsman, elite athlete, which these Formula One drivers are, to get the best out of yourself, to achieve your best performance, you need to be in the right headspace. And there is no way Sergio Perez is in the right headspace to maximise performance right now. The whole world's talking about who's going to replace him, and is that even going to happen before the end of the season? Like you say, if this rumour about the contract and this 100-point gap that might trigger an exit even at the midway point, if that's true, and of course we never really know the full details of these contracts, but there's rarely smoke without fire, so if that is true, that's an option that Red Bull will have to be taking very, very seriously. As you said, there's almost no way, there's no world in which he is beneath the 100-point mark at the halfway point. That comes next weekend at the Belgian Grand Prix. There's no way they're going to see that change, and so you've got to think, if that's all correct, Red Bull must be already well underway in deciding what they're going to do, because I don't believe there's anything Sergio Perez can do this weekend and next weekend that changes your opinion of him as a driver, and therefore what you think he can bring to this team, where they're now in a fight in the Constructors' Championship. They have contenders, they haven't had that for the last few years, so the role of Perez within the team perhaps becomes even more important. Verstappen can't necessarily just do this on his own. He's having a very good go of it, but he needs a second teammate there. So Red Bull must be some way down the line, you'd think, of already having made decisions, and it feels like it's just a matter of time before we hear the announcement. And if that's the case, of course it's destroying the mindset of their second driver, Sergio Perez.
This is the thing though, Verstappen can win the Drivers' Championship. I don't think anybody's got a doubt about that. It is that Constructors' Championship that now is looking like a threat. McLaren on a march, 2 drivers consistently scoring points. So too the same with Ferrari, although Charles Leclerc's had a rough couple of races, but we fully expect him to bounce back as Verstappen rounds the final corner, looking set to go even faster on this lap around. The DRS board slides open and he finds half a second. Now 8 tenths clear of his teammate. Just the 2 Red Bulls on the track, and those are the only ones that have set a lap time so far. But I wonder, do Red Bull care as much about the Constructors' Championship as they do the Drivers' title? Because for me, it seems like that team have always been driver first. There's always been a number one. It's always been Sebastian Vettel, Mark Webber, and the Constructors has just kind of happened as a result.
Yeah, and there's probably some truth in that. but they've always taken the constructors as well, pretty much. From 2021, which was when Max started taking over this period of dominance, and Mercedes still won the constructors. Beyond that, in this era at least, they've swept the board, and it's not just been because of Max's dominance. It's because Sergio Perez, as it's been. Let's hear from Verstappen.
Just the middle sector in some corners, I'm understeering a bit much, but at the same time, I don't have massive amount of rear grip, so I don't know if I really should take more front flap.
So he's just talking about the front wing flap angles that are easily adjustable and can change the balance, the aerodynamic balance of the car. So that's a conversation they're obviously having on the radio about when he comes into the pit lane and he's on a slow down lap right now. Do they make an adjustment? In terms of this Constructors' Championship, it's not just about the Constructors' Championship. Of course, the team want it. They want to win it. It is important. It's what determines things like prize money to the teams. There are big factors associated to it. But there's also a bigger picture here, because as I said earlier, next year we go into the same sort of set of regulations, if you like. These cars effectively carry over. The competition that we're seeing hotting up on track with the likes of McLaren, Mercedes and potentially Ferrari, that's only going to get closer as the weeks and months roll on into next season. It might not just be the Constructors' Championship that is under threat next time. And so the second driver, whether that's Perez or someone else, can play a major role in even the Drivers' Championship. You can have two cars fighting at the front, and that still can benefit Max Verstappen in his own challenge for the world title, but you might need two drivers. McLaren, up until recent races when Piastri has struggled, have had two drivers generally there. Ferrari, generally pretty close, as you said. The Mercedes drivers reasonably close, and yet there's this huge difference between Red Bull's two drivers. That will play a role, and Red Bull will be conscious of that.
Can anybody do better, is my question, because there's always been the second driver in that team. There is a curse on that second seat. You're cursed because you've got Max Verstappen as your teammate for a start, and everyone thinks he's got a couple of attempts extra within him anyway, regardless of what car he's driving. But he is such a superb teammate. He's a teammate destroyer.
Yeah. So
who else do Red Bull put in that they realistically think can do better than Sergio Perez to help them be able to secure a Constructors' Championship, or at least be able to still have both cars in the fight?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think Max Verstappen is a formidable partner in terms of teammates, and when you talk about confidence playing a role in your performance, Verstappen has it. It probably doesn't take very long for you to come up against him and consistently get beaten for your own confidence as a second driver to start waning. But there's two sides to that, because let's say they decide to offload Sergio Perez at the summer break. The options at that point are pretty much only drivers from their own stable. So you could look at Lawson, you could look at moving up Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda. They may not seem like World Championship material options at this point, but it maybe doesn't matter for the second half of this season. As a stopgap, you get to view them in the Red Bull car up against Verstappen, in a car, by the way, that is very much suited to Verstappen's driving, having been developed in that way over the last few years. You get to see what they can do in that set of circumstances. That could then shape your longer term plan, and if it doesn't work, well, okay, what's going to happen in 25? We don't even know if Verstappen's going to be there. We've got the likes of Carlos Sainz still without a seat. There are bigger options at play for the longer term future, but why not, if you're Red Bull, get someone else in that? So you know what Perez can do. We've seen it. We're seeing it play out right now. So why not put someone else in, give them half a season and just see what happens? It feels like there's nothing to lose at this point. I
agree. Surely you put Tsunoda in for the final half of the season. You give Lawson alongside Daniel Ricciardo RB for the rest of the year. You see if Tsunoda can live up to the hype and be a decent second driver, if he can overcome this seeming view that Red Bull just don't really rate him, yet they've offered him another contract to stay at RB. Lawson is chomping at the bit, and we do believe that if Red Bull cannot offer him a race drive for next year, he has the option to go to another team. That, to me, seems like the logical way to go. Me too. And I go back to what have you got to lose in that scenario? You might find that a Tsunoda or a Lawson, for example, might just suit this Red Bull car. You might find that it's more closely matched to their driving style than maybe the RB is to Tsunoda right now, and you might just get an uplift in performance. So together with the idea of confidence boosting being placed up in that sort of main team, that can lift the driver. These little details can switch on an element of performance that might be lacking at the moment. So
Why not give it a go? The alternative is a Perez that is so far behind a teammate is almost inconsequential, if not a major negative. So roll the dice.
Roll the dice, says Mark Priestley. 45 minutes and 42, 41, 40 seconds remain of free practice 3. There's actually not that much going on the track. Max Verstappen is pumping at the lap times, though, to be fair. He's just gone even quicker, over 3/10 up on his own time. He's now into the 1:17s, a 1:17.93.38 on the hard tyre. He's the only one out on track, bar Esteban Ocon, who has only just gone out in his Alpine on an outlap, and he's stuck on the soft tyre. Everybody else is still in the pits. Indeed, only 9 drivers have actually ventured out for any kind of lap at all. Everybody else has stayed in the pits.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's very limited activity. It is very different conditions, but these you'd think might be closer conditions to what we might see later on for qualifying than we saw yesterday in terms of when it comes to temperatures. And as we heard Andrew talk about earlier, the temperatures can play a major role in whose car tends to suit it. Better. The Mercedes clearly has been working better in lower temperatures than the really extreme high stuff. So, yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. We will see everybody out. We've still got 45 minutes on the clock. We are going to see people rolling out of the garage shortly. But yes, a little bit of hesitation at this point. Yeah,
Stroll's just come out as well in the Aston Martin. So slowly more and more starting to come out on track. Let's park Perez for the moment, because it's so easy to talk in length about the Mexican driver. I want to talk about McLaren, your old team.
Yeah.
They are on a mission, it seems, over the last few races. Once again, 2 years on the trot, a development upgrade has seen their prospects transform, and they really have this upward trajectory going on. There has been a bit of scrutiny on them, though, in the last few races, and particularly, I think, at the British Grand Prix. We've said it before in other circumstances that Lando Norris should have won more than one race so far this season, but I think the British Grand Prix was probably a real opportunity that McLaren, the team, did make a tyre strategy error in the final stint. What is your view on what's happening there at McLaren at the moment?
So I would agree. I think there's been a number of races in recent times where they could have done things differently and potentially won a race. I think Canada was another one. I know that some will say that the timing of that safety car was unfortunate. I don't believe that. I think it made their decision a little bit tougher, but I still think they could have made a different decision that would have given them a much better shot of winning. But you know what? I'm cool with all of this, because what's great about this is that McLaren are finding their way into these positions where we're talking about them having the opportunity to win a race. And this is what happens when a team transitions from being a midfield team, which is what McLaren were just a couple of years ago, let's be frank about it, into being a front runner. You have to go through a transition where you find yourself with the opportunities to win. You make some mistakes, you learn from them. Then the next time the opportunity comes up, that experience plays into your decision making. You hopefully get them a bit better, and you find your way to the front, where you then hopefully consistently make better decisions, and you start dominating the sport. So it's a natural progression. I don't think anybody, I know McLaren fans and even McLaren themselves will be impatient. Lando is impatient. He wants to start winning more and more races, and that's a brilliant drive to have. But I think let's not be too focused on the mistakes. Mistakes are just part of anybody going through a learning process, and they're having to learn how to win again. They haven't been at the front of this sport for a long, long time. Most people, I was at McLaren back luckily in a very successful period where every weekend we were winning races, or at least challenging for titles every year. So everybody in that organisation was conditioned to believing we were good enough, knowing we were good enough. You had a bit more confidence in your decisions. Today, most people in that McLaren organisation have never won a championship. They may have won 1 or 2 races max. That's it. That's most of the organisation is like that, and that changes everything about how you think, how your culture develops, and so you have to go through what they're going through right now to get there. And I'm excited for them. I'm really pleased to see them back up there. I know how much work for a long, long time has been going in behind the scenes to get them to this point. And I'm really excited to see that over the next few months, and definitely into next year, these mistakes will shape the successes that they go on to have.
Yeah, you're right. You're spot on. It's a really exciting time, isn't it? And they have been the top scorers over the last 7 Grand Prix. They've scored 21 more points than Red Bull have, and that goes back to what we were chatting about. They've had 2 cars in the fight. I think there was a little bit of chat about Oscar Piastri's start to the season and how was it a little bit underwhelming considering all the hype he had, but it does seem to be paying off now. Second place in the sprint in Austria, second place as well in the Grand Prix, fourth in Silverstone, when really he could have been in the hunt. It could have been a 1-2 actually for McLaren. So do you think Piastri is also now starting to find that flow a bit more in his second year? Yeah,
I think so, and I think it's important that he does, because what's the danger for Piastri is that he becomes known as McLaren's second driver. You're already starting, all the hype is around Lando right now. Of course, he's won a race. He's the one that's at the moment consistently up there fighting Max. There should be no reason really why Oscar can't start to join them at the front, and he needs to do that because he needs to establish himself, get his elbows out even within the team, so that he doesn't slip into this subconscious role of being a number 2 driver. Because what happens is the team starts to sort of think of you like that. It's never spoken about. You start to get the wrong end of decisions, and then you start to think about it as a driver. You start to almost imagine yourself as not being quite as good as this other guy that's getting all the talk. So he needs to avoid that. These are the little tiny margins that come with experience. I think he'll be fine, and I think McLaren have got a really strong lineup that as this car gets quicker and quicker, they're going to be in great shape.
Yeah, absolutely right. He was actually confined to the garage for quite a lot of yesterday in FP2. Picked up a little bit of floor damage, did Oscar Piastri. But now everyone seems to have finally finished their morning coffee and are back onto the circuit now. Everybody's out there with the exception of Max Verstappen, who was putting in the lap times early doors on his own. And no emergence from the pits yet from Daniel Ricciardo. 39 minutes and 13 seconds remain. Lando Norris is fastest, a 1:16.9 on the soft tyre ahead of Russell. Then it's Albon. Verstappen on the hard tyre is 4th. Sargent up into 5th ahead of Alonso. Bottas is 8th with Piastri joining his teammate up in 2nd now. Gasly 9th, Stroll in the top 10. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton making his way past quite a lot of traffic in the middle sector, making his way round the right-hander of turn 11. Just about manages to thread the needle between all of the cars in front of him. He had Ocon, Albon, Sargent all in the way. He's on the soft tyre, brakes for the left-hander of turn 13 at a track that he very much knows, he very much loves. We talked about how amazing it was that he became a 9-time winner around Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. He could well do it again here.
Yeah, loves this place, doesn't he? Just to go back to that traffic issue you just talked about there, this is another short circuit, meaning that there's literally not enough track to space the field out very far. So we are going to see traffic in the early part of qualifying when all 20 cars are on track in Q1 being a major issue. People trying to find their gaps, and as you said there, because you have these slow corners that come through the last part of the lap leading onto the start-finish straight. That's where everyone wants to build the gaps and find the space. If you've got someone coming through there on a hot lap, it's so treacherously dangerous. I mean, I hope that there are regulations and rules in place, and this is why we see people queuing to get out the pit lane to try and create the gap in the pit lane. But it's by the time you get all the way round to that final couple of corners, that's when you've really got to nail down your exact gap from the car in front. So that could be a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, just over 4.3 kilometres, 2.7 miles this track, 14 turns, 6 to the left and 8 to the right. But yeah, that first part of qualifying later on today, Q1, is going to be very much an education in traffic management. You can listen to qualifying here on the BBC Sport website and app. We'll be on air from 2:55 this afternoon ahead of the session starting at 3 o'clock. And there's also a new way you can listen to our Formula One coverage with your smart speaker of choice. All you have to do is ask your smart speaker to play Hungarian Grand Prix Practice 3, or for later on, if you want to listen to it in the kitchen or you want it upstairs in your bedroom, all you have to do is ask your smart speaker to ask BBC Sounds to play Hungarian Grand Prix qualifying, and then you can listen in full flow, us describing who's going to get pole position, and what a treat that will be for you.
I mean, as long as it really is a smart speaker. I've got a couple at home and they're not that smart.
Yeah.
They keep getting it wrong, but there you go. Speak clearly.
Speak clearly, really enunciate, and hopefully it will work. Just over 36 minutes still remaining. Charles Leclerc is making his way around the final corner. We actually just saw a replay of him having a bit of a lock-up going into turn 1 on his last lap around, but this is his first proper lap time on the board, and it's only 17th fastest on the soft tyre.
Very average.
Yeah, and Ferrari, well, Carlos Sainz was quick in FP1, but again, it's always so difficult to really understand what's going on in these practice sessions. Different fuel loads, different run plans. Of course, Charles Leclerc trying to make up for some time lost yesterday in FP2, and actually nearly had, we're just seeing a replay now, nearly had another moment coming through that fast uphill left-hander of turn 4, where he crashed yesterday, the rear stepping out on him. He saved it on that occasion. But that is a tricky corner around here.
It's a really tricky corner because you have to completely commit, 100% commit to a corner that's actually blind. So as you come up the hill, you can't really see the apex, and you certainly can't see the exit. So you have to turn in at the point you know you're supposed to be turning in with complete blind faith, and hope you don't run out too wide. What happened yesterday, and I think what happened again there, is he just ran a little bit wide and the bottom of the car just nestled onto the top of the curb, which unsettles it. Of course, you lose any adhesion of the tyres, and yesterday, of course, he completely lost that and spun it round. Today, just managed to regain control, but it is a tricky one, and it may be that the Ferrari, maybe it's running a little bit lower ride height than others, maybe it's not got such a compliance in the suspension that others perhaps have. Here's Gasly.
I don't know what's happened, but
completed a time left behind.
Front brakes.
Gasly in the Alpine going into turn 1, hits the brakes, and that front right with now a big old flat spot on it. Lock up, smoke off that front right tyre. Gasly not sure on the radio there why that's happening, not happy with his brake settings.
No, it's completely ruined a set of tyres. It was a really big lock up. So normally when you get a lock up that's that big, it does suggest there's a problem. You get the occasional one where the driver's just pushed the braking a little bit too late and he's just locked a tyre. But when it's that big, you'd suggest either the driver's got it horribly wrong, which is unusual, or there might be a problem. These are, of course, really complex systems that control the brake balance or the bias between front to rear, but also, of course, you're throwing the car around over curbs, and when you start to unload one of the front tyres without that loading on, it's very easy to lock it. So a little bit of work to do on that, but they'll be able to see something in the data, and I'm sure he'll find his way back to the pits, get rid of that set, and hopefully make some tweaks to get that problem sorted.
33 minutes, 39, 38, 37 seconds remain. Norris is fastest out on track, and that was a little bit tight coming through the penultimate corner between Carlos Sainz and Nico Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg was making his way through, trying to take the racing line. Sainz was slowing down, creating a gap before a fast lap, and then he just speeds up at the same time Hülkenberg is on the inside of him. They avoid contact, but that was a bit close for comfort, Mark.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't actually see if Hülkenberg was on a flyer, but if he was, Carlos will be in big trouble. If he'll certainly have to visit the stewards, I've no doubt. But if he was on an outlap as well, it's one of those where they're just jostling for position, and there's no way Carlos was going to let him past.
Yeah, well, Sainz has gone for it now. I'm sure we'll get another look at it, but it did get a little bit tight coming through that left-hander of turn 13. Norris is fastest, ahead of Ricciardo, Tsunoda third, Piastri fourth, then it's Hamilton rounds out the top 5, ahead of Russell, Albon, Hülkenberg, Sainz, who we are hearing now is 9th, 10th is Alonso, ahead of Magnussen, Verstappen 12th, Sargent, Bottas, Ocon is the top 15, Stroll is 16th ahead of Joe, Leclerc is 18th ahead of Gasly, who is 19th, and Sergio Perez currently down in 20th, and everybody out on track with the exception of the 2 RBs, the McLaren of Piastri, the Mercedes of Hamilton, the Williams of Albon, Alonso, Sargent, Stroll and Gasly all in the pits.
So Norris's fastest time at the moment at 1:16.9. Whenever I'm doing these commentaries, just in my own preparation, I always jump on the F1 game.
You do preparation for this?
Oh yeah, mate, can't you tell? So I always try and refamiliarise myself with the circuit, how the cars behave around them.
Listen to yourself.
I did a 16. Yeah, listen to myself. I did a 1:16.7 this morning. So at the moment, I'm the fastest. Yeah. So when Red Bull are looking for this second driver.
Your Mark Priestley is available.
Hello.
Absolutely is available. And just getting a replay of Carlos Sainz making his way through turn 4. And it's the aggressive curbs on the exit that if you run out just that little bit too wide, it really unsettles the car. And unless you catch it, you're heading for the wall.
Yeah, but the problem is if you don't fully commit, you know, it costs you so much time because it's such a high-speed corner. If you go into it too conservatively, you cost yourself through that corner, but also the next one, which is a very fast right-hander. So it's a real difficult one. I mean, that's what practice is for, of course. It's learning where to sort of lift, where to turn in without being able to see the normal markers that you might familiarise yourself with.
Kevin Magnussen in the Haas is just coming to the start-finish line now on a quick lap to put his Haas 7th, about half a second adrift of Lando Norris. Of course, the Dane's future, now known at least, it will not be at Haas. Ayo Komatsu, the team principal, announcing in the build-up to this weekend that Kevin Magnussen will be leaving the team at the end of this year in his, this has really been his second iteration with Haas after both him and Grosjean were cast aside for Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher a couple of years ago. And those bells and screaming you heard a moment ago, that was from the grandstands with fans holding up the Danish flag. So he's got some support here. But K-Mag's time at Haas will be up at the end of this season. I don't think it was too much of a surprise for anybody, but I think if he does fall out of Formula One completely at the end of the year, I think he will be a missed character from the sport.
Yeah, definitely a missed character. I really like him. I actually really like his driving style. I know it's controversial at times. He's ruffled a few feathers, but, you know, I don't mind that. I think we need characters like that in the sport. So he's had a decent career, as you said, sort of 2 versions of it. And I think he can go out being relatively happy. I'm sure he would have wanted more. I'm sure he would have wanted more at the sharp end. But, you know, he's had a decent run, and I think he can be fairly content. This whole driver market, I mean, we expect Ocon to slot into that seat. We're sort of waiting for that announcement. It feels like everyone knows it's happening, but no one's saying it's happening yet. That's what we fully expect to happen. But there's so much movement still to play out, as you said, in this driver market. And it almost feels like there's going to be a number of drivers who end up in seats knowing they weren't the first choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but do you think, because having now met, you know, the majority of the drivers over the last couple of years, they're all, you know, they can all be very nice and polite, but they are athletes, and they're almost hardwired, right, into thinking, and they have to be this way, they are the best, no matter what, because if the minute you start to doubt yourself, your performances will dip too, no matter how good you are. So surely, even if that is the case, they don't think like that.
No, I know what you mean, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of teams that are sort of holding out to see if they can get someone better. Yeah, you know, it's all hinging on either Max Verstappen or more likely Carlos Sainz, where he ends up, and then they'll decide who they're going to take. You could take a Bottas right now, you could take an Ocon, you could announce Ocon right now. There are others as well that are free and available, but no one's ready to commit to doing it because they might be able to get someone better. So when they end up having to take one of those drivers, there's going to be a few of them that know they weren't the sort of prime option. They were sort of almost second best. I'm sure you're right. Their own mentality will quickly get over it and they'll convince themselves that they were the best driver in the world again.
And the salary, I'm sure, will make them see. Yeah. Will make them see that it was all worked out in the end. But yeah, we are still waiting for Carlos Sainz to make his mind up about where he wants to go, and that will really, once that happens, the rest of the pieces will fall into place. George Russell, by the way, has gone quickest in the last couple of laps, a 10th quicker than Lando Norris on a 1:16.8.
Still not as quick as me, mate.
No, Mark Priestley still very much available for a drive if you need him. Piastri's actually been rinsing that McLaren around the final sector in particular, fastest of anybody in that final sector, enough for 3rd fastest overall. But Russell has gone quickest. Hamilton is down in 9th at the moment, and he is still out there. His last lap was his quickest so far, 1:17.492. Teammate Russell a 1:16.8. So I'm sure Hamilton will go again. He actually just comes into the pits. But I wonder, as Andrew alluded to at the start, if the cooler temperatures are just starting to come back in the favour of particularly George Russell and Mercedes. We know how quick Russell is around one lap here. I mean, in the qualifying head-to-head between him and Hamilton, it's 10-2 in favour of George Russell, which over Lewis Hamilton is a mighty feat.
Yeah. I mean, Lewis, of course, course, has had that boost off the back of the British Grand Prix win, which I'm sure will help. These little psychological things make such a difference, as we touched on earlier with Sergio Perez in the negative sense. It equally works in the positive sense. When you have a great result, particularly when one that, as the world was talking about with Lewis's win at Silverstone, it just gives you that boost, which can carry forward into the remaining races. While we're talking about Mercedes, I would love to know what you think about this, Harry, but what do you think about, I think, at the start of this season, when the whole talk about Lewis going to Ferrari started, Carlos Sainz was very quickly written off as not being an option for Mercedes. I wonder if that changes, if they decide that Kimi Antonelli is maybe not ready, if he's not, he's not experienced enough, they want to give him some time, either in the junior categories or maybe in a Williams, for example. Is a Carlos Sainz, for me, it's a really strong option to be teammate to George Russell. I certainly wouldn't have been writing him off at this point.
No, not at all. And I actually think Toto Wolff, in the last few weeks, really has suddenly gone a little bit colder on putting Kimi Antonelli, their young F2 hotshot, into a Mercedes seat next year. Still might happen. Antonelli did finally make a breakthrough win in Formula 2. Oh, big lock-up from one of the Alpines going into turn 1. It was actually the RB of Yuki Tsunoda who rejoins. I think it would be the sensible option, in my opinion, would be to do what they did with George Russell and put Antonelli in the Williams to learn, make those mistakes, and then absolutely you put Carlos Sainz in for 2 years.
Which is the minimum you can give him, really. Yeah,
because that's what he'll want, because he'll want to see himself into the new regulation change in 2026. Mercedes expected to be very much big players. Of course, if you're a manufacturer and engine constructor, you're going to be a big player. So, and then you can evaluate George Russell even further as well. He's already shown very well up against Lewis Hamilton, but what is he going to be like against Carlos Sainz, who is very highly rated now? In fact, some would say he was underrated towards the beginning of the season, but for a moment in time, he was the only man who had beaten Max Verstappen in his most dominant run ever. So that's what I would do, but I also think Toto Wolff doesn't want to make the mistake that he did with Max Verstappen, where they let the Dutchman fall through their fingers because they didn't have a seat to offer him back in 2015, and he went to Red Bull. And then the Toro Rosso team as it was then, and maybe that's what he's thinking with Antonelli.
I think that's a very real possibility, because even if they did put him into the Williams, imagine if he set the world alight in a Williams and was being talked about as the next Max Verstappen. What do you do then? You've got 2 drivers in long-term contracts in your main team. What do you do? Unless there's some clause for a Carlos Sainz which gives them an option to swap them and get rid of him. But Carlos doesn't want to sign that contract. So it is a really difficult scenario. And it's such an unknown. Kimi Antonelli is an unknown. He could be the next Max Verstappen, and you don't want to let that slip through your fingers. So it's a challenge for them. It's a really difficult driver market to figure out at the moment, isn't it?
And his F2 results haven't exactly been stellar. He's not in the running for the championship. Okay, he did just make a breakthrough win. But then you look at Oliver Behrman, his teammate. They're actually performing at a fairly similar level, and Behrman has obviously been wowing people in not only that Ferrari drive in the race where he replaced Sainz for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but in his FP1 sessions, and now obviously confirmed to be in the Haas seat next year. And he's a Ferrari young driver, so they clearly wanted him in a car ASAP. But it's also important to remember Antonelli has been, I don't want to say rushed through, but he skipped Formula 3. He hasn't done Formula 3. He went from the level below, missed F3. They put him straight into F2. And that's a lot of pressure. And so even to be rubbing shoulders with some of the more experienced runners is probably quite a good thing.
Well, and also the team have worked with him. The Mercedes Formula 1 team have worked with him at tests. And as we've talked about before, that gives you a real insight that, there's no way you can just get from a set of results or lap times. It's how he works with engineers, how he deals with media, how he works with the team. These things are majorly impactful in your decision-making process. So they will have a far better insight than just his F2 results give the rest of us, and that will obviously play into the decision.
We talk about how good the engine might be, though, from Mercedes, and that's why Sainz would obviously be interested in going to a Mercedes and want to be that seat. But I do wonder, it seems to have gone cold now, that Williams seat for him. But I convinced myself that Williams were going to have this mega turnaround for 2026 because they've signed on to be, again, to have Mercedes engines. James Bowles is leading that team in a new direction. You know, in the last few months, they've made 11 new hires in the aero department, 13 in the design department of Williams. They're trying to transform that Grove squad, which is outdated. But they are moving in the right direction. Albon is proving to be very, very good. And I just think back to when we had the last big engine regulation change, when we came into the hybrid era, was 2014, and Williams were almost the second best team.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think Williams will be a major player because it's all like we touched on earlier. McLaren, when they were, struggling around the midfield, even at the back, let's not make any mistake, a few years ago, they were the last team a number of races. In the background, and I have a little bit more insight to this than other people, of course, a lot of my friends still there, I speak to a lot of people on a regular basis. I know and knew at the time there was a huge amount of work going on, particularly in the last 5 years, let's say, in terms of building the team, organising the structure of the team, investing in the infrastructure of the team. These are the things that build champions. Of course, you've got to turn out a great car and have great drivers and all the rest of it. Of course, you have to do those things, but it's all got to be underpinned by wonderful foundations. At the moment, Williams are building those wonderful foundations. I have total faith in James Vowles. He comes with huge experience. I think he's a very clever, intelligent man. He's worked under an amazing team culture at Mercedes, under great leadership, and has learnt from all of that. If he's now putting that in place at Williams, at least even a part of what he's seen at Mercedes, we can expect some great things from that team.
Yeah, again, it just underlines how much there is to talk about off the track as well. 90 minutes, 53, 52, 51 seconds remain of the final free practice session ahead of qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And lots of work being done out on the track, lots putting in the lap times, especially Red Bull, who are really trying to gather data and to get on top of this big upgrade that they brought this weekend. Max Verstappen has put in 20 laps so far. He's still in the pits. The lap times aren't showcasing much, but they really are putting in the mileage. Perez is plumb last, but he's done 18 laps. So they are really trying to get on top of this. This is their biggest upgrade they've brought for the season for Red Bull.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they're being forced into doing this, aren't they? Because the competition's hotting up around them. If you go back just last year, they were so dominant, they didn't really have to upgrade their car. In fact, they could switch onto this year's car development way earlier than anybody else because there was nothing in the way of competition. But now there genuinely is, and it's great for the sport because it's pushing everybody, even the likes of Red Bull, who started the season so strongly. Now they're having to fight their way through this championship. And yes, the early rounds have given them such an advantage. We still fully expect Max to win this reasonably comfortably. But the picture going into next year and even the end of this year is so much tighter. So they're having to dig deep and fight and throw money and development time. And bear in mind, given the dominance of Red Bull, they haven't got the development time that others have. Their wind tunnel time, their CFD time, the sort of virtual development time in the sort of simulation world is so limited because they won the championship. So this is not the most straightforward fight for them up against others that are a little bit freer to bring more updates to their car.
Lewis Hamilton out on track at the moment. He's put the soft tyre on and is starting to push on this lap. Personal best in sector 1, makes his way through the turn 6 and 7 chicane, quick right, then left, and then you get into these almost long flowing medium speed corners in the middle sector through turn 10 left-hander, which bleeds into the right-hander of turn 11 before a short straight down towards the braking zone of the 90-degree right-hander of turn 12. Fastest of anybody in the middle sector is Lewis Hamilton. His teammate George Russell has just improved on his own lap time. Still fastest is Russell, a 1:16.5, but Hamilton is flying round the final corner, tries to keep it neat and tidy. The front end not quite biting though in that final corner. Let's see what it is across the line. Does find time, does improve, but not quicker than his teammate. 2/10 between the two Mercedes in the FP3. Russell ahead of Hamilton.
Yeah, look at that. So it's 2 Mercedes, it's 2 McLarens, and then it's 2 Ferraris, and then it's 2 RBs, by the way.
And then it's 2 Hasses.
Unbelievable. They call it the Noah's Ark, don't they, where they're all going 2 by 2. But it is a really good sign for Mercedes, and yes, these lower temperatures may well be really helping them. They have the cars in this modern era have a very specific tyre temperature window in which they operate, and if you're outside of that window, even by just a few degrees, you lose grip, you lose performance, dramatically so. And so the cooler ambient temperatures and the cooler track temperatures that they're experiencing today, with a bit of cloud cover as opposed to yesterday, it was so hot, is really coming back into the strengths of the Mercedes car. Of course, if it heats up again either later this afternoon, which I don't think we expect it to, or tomorrow, that might swing back towards others, the likes of McLaren or Red Bull. But at the moment, Mercedes really making use of it, and that is 2 solid lap times from both Russell and Hamilton.
Yeah, well, at the moment, according to the weather radar I've looked at, it is forecast to be slightly warmer later on today, but not massively much, and warmer tomorrow. At the moment, a 40% chance of rain tomorrow at the time of the race.
That's exciting.
So that could well change things, but it could keep Mercedes in the balance. They did say this weekend would be a little bit more of a challenge, but right now it's looking rosy. And, well, it was this time last year that Lewis Hamilton took pole position back in 2023, and that was his last pole in Formula One as it currently stands, and having to wait 945 days for his next Grand Prix win, coming in sensational fashion at the British Grand Prix. He's riding high, comes to a track again that he is the most successful statistically, 8-time winner around the Hungarian, could be 9 come the end of this weekend. And the fact we're even saying that just showcases how we've got a fight on our hands. If you'd have told us all this back in Bahrain, I don't think any of us would have believed each other.
No, of course not. And it is a real sign, particularly in the hands of Mercedes, how they've unlocked, or finally started to unlock, the potential of this car. Something they've struggled with for so long now. And, you know, I keep wondering, you know, they went down all these different paths of having vastly different design concepts, a sort of no side pod era that they eventually had to wind back on because it just wasn't working. I wonder if, you know, some of those concepts still had value, and whether they might even revisit them now they've unlocked some of the things they've unlocked. What they think they have found is not necessarily, it's not like a new front wing that's transformed the car or a new part they've bolted on. It's a new way of working. It's a new way of combining things like the trackside teams with the aerodynamic teams and the vehicle dynamics teams back at base. Getting them to link up more closely has been at least one of the major keys to unlocking performance of the car. So I wonder if some of those, what we thought were crazy concepts at the time that it just couldn't get to work, whether actually there's something in that which might now be viable.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, Mercedes are looking quick. Lando Norris has just put in a blinder of a lap time to go almost half a second clear of George Russell. We were just watching Lando's on board throughout that entire final lap, looking planted, looking hooked up, looking confident as well in that McLaren.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at this. I mean, great for Lando and for McLaren and for Mercedes. Alex Albon just popped in an absolute flyer at just half a second off Lando's blistering pace. I mean, he's on par with those Mercedes.
They have now eclipsed your time.
They have, all right, yeah, I'm not, okay. Not as good as I thought I was. But the other side of this coin is that they are all on the soft tyre doing sort of quali-style runs at the moment. The 2 Red Bulls are still pounding around doing their long runs that you touched on earlier, thinking much more towards the race. They're on the harder tyres, full of fuel. They're trying to figure out completely different things to the guys at the front. So if everyone's sitting there thinking, well, where on earth are the Red Bulls, it's because they're on a very different run plan. Piastri just gone in very, very close to his teammates. So both McLarens, there's nothing between the 2 of them in first and second right now.
Less than half a tenth of a second. We should also say they are continuing, Red Bull, to try and get the most out of these development packages, and they are splitting the runs on each car for this final practice session. So Verstappen, in terms of upgrades, Verstappen has both the new floor from Silverstone and the new aero package that's been introduced here, which includes the engine cover, halo, front and rear corner, and a front wing. Perez only has the floor, which that's come from the team and reported by our very own F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. So thank you for keeping us in the loop on that one, Andrew. Perez is currently 20th, 2.6 seconds off as the Alpine of Pierre Gasly has a run out wide through turn 4 and nearly has a moment. Keeps it planted though. Hulkenberg's flying in the first sector. But yeah, the 2 Red Bulls currently 14th. Verstappen just on an outlap. Perez still in the pits, 20th and last.
and it's a big upgrade. What we've seen on Verstappen's car, at least, the sort of bodywork changes, it's an aerodynamic, almost a conceptual change of the aerodynamics, particularly around the back of the car. It looks very different, but crucially, it completely changes the way the airflow behaves down towards the sort of beam wing of at the rear end, the back of the floor, the diffuser, how it helps to draw airflow out of that diffuser and obviously therefore generate downforce. So it's not a small tweak, and so a lot of this work here will be understanding what that's doing to the car, how it changes how the car behaves with its tyres. What's the degradation rates like compared to what it might be on Perez's car that doesn't have that big aerodynamic change. Is there a big difference here? What are the drivers feeling, of course, but what's the data showing, and over the long runs, how's it affecting this long run performance for tyres?
Well, I think we'll see the qualifying pace shortly from Max Verstappen, who is out there coming through sector 1. He's stuck on the soft tyre. Pirelli providing their softest compound in the range this weekend, the C3 hard, the C4 medium and the C5 soft. That is what Verstappen is on at the moment. He's a little bit down on Norris through sector 1, but up on his own personal best time, making his way now into that middle sector, keeping it nice and hooked up through the long flowing right-hander of turn 11 down towards the braking zone, hits the brakes just before the 50-meter board into the right-hander of turn 12. Then it's slightly off camber braking into the left-hander, the penultimate corner, turn 13. You run out wide almost as if you're going into the pit entry, then you quickly switch over to the left-hand side of the track before moving back over to the right to take the racing line for the final corner. DRS open, third fastest time for Max Verstappen, a 1:16.3, slots in behind the two McLarens and ahead of the Mercedes of George Russell.
Yeah, so having watched that from his onboard as we followed it round the lap, it felt like it was a nice tidy lap, but there was more time in it. It didn't feel like he was pushing to the limit. There were a couple of moments in the middle sector where he just looked like he didn't quite take the right line, and we're talking fractions here, but a second bite at a turn into a corner, for example. These are the kind of things that, this is his first run on soft tyres this morning, so these will be the sort of things that the car will behave, by the way, completely differently with low fuel on the soft tyres as it would have done for the rest of this session on the heavy fuel and the hard tyres. So he's got to figure out different turning points. How much later can he brake? Can he get on the throttle a little bit earlier, or is it a bit later? All these little differences are now being figured out. But I think there's more time. He's about a quarter of a second behind the two McLarens at the moment. I think there's more time in that Red Bull to come.
9 minutes and 18, 17, 16 seconds remain of FP3. Carlos Sainz embarks on a flyer on the soft tyre. It's Norris and Piastri, the two McLarens, 1 and 2, ahead of Verstappen. Then it's Russell and Ricciardo in the RB, who rounds out the top 5. Albon, Hülkenberg, Hamilton, Bottas and Sargent make up the rest of the top 10. Then it's the two Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc. Tsunoda 13th, Gasly 14th. Magnussen is in 15th, ahead of Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, the former teammates, 16th and 17th. Stroll is 18th. Zhou Guanyu 19th, and Perez ventures out of the pits on an outlap. Now he's stuck on the soft tyre like his teammate. He's currently 20th and last with just over 8.5 minutes left to go. And we're currently seeing what Carlos Sainz has in his tank at Ferrari. Quietly kind of collecting the points as Carlos Sainz over the last couple of race weekends. Managed to get onto the podium in Austria thanks to Lando Norris and Verstappen coming together. Was a kind of solid 5th place at the British Grand Prix when Leclerc had a miserable last 2 races. So Sainz has actually been able to close up back to within 4 points of his teammate Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship, considering Sainz missed a whole round in Saudi Arabia when the team were performing very well indeed. He is starting to close in again on his teammate, and indeed closes in on lap time 2, crosses the line, 5th fastest, about half a second away though from Lando Norris.
I think Sainz has actually had a really strong season. If you think about the ups and downs of that Ferrari car in relation to the cars around it, he's been pretty consistent, as a driver. I mean, you never want to sort of say, well, Ferrari have made a mistake in letting him go, because they're bringing in, someone of the calibre of Lewis Hamilton, and who knows what successes that might generate over the next couple of years. But it must be a tough call to let someone like Carlos Sainz go when he's doing such a good job. He's obviously a very nice guy, a great team member, but he's also doing a really strong job. Of course, he's putting himself out there because he's looking for a new job. He's looking for a new drive somewhere. And what he's doing this year, I think, is going to pique the interests of the likes of Toto Wolff, and people are going to start to sit up and take notice. And over the longevity of a season, this is the kind of guy you want in your team, I'd say.
You do feel a bit for Carlos Sainz, don't you? Kind of axed before even the beginning of the season, but of course you don't turn down Lewis Hamilton when he's on the market, and Sainz is not as quick as Charles Leclerc on outright one-lap pace. But Sainz, I think, makes up for that in other attributes. His mindset, he's got an engineer's mind. Yeah. How many times have we seen him overrule strategy calls back when Ferrari were making poor strategy call after poor strategy call? I look back to his first Grand Prix win at Silverstone in 2022, and how on the safety car restart, he was saying, why am I going to try and help Leclerc when he's on old tyres? He's going to get absolutely annihilated. I'm on new tyres. Let me run away with this because I can win it. Yeah. I can't. This is not the way to go, guys. And what did he do? He went out and won it.
I 100% agree. I think you've hit the nail on the head. He's got an engineering brain. He's got capacity to think beyond just being a driver. And I think that's so valuable in this sport. He's always looking for opportunities to do better and to improve himself and the performance of him and the team. And it's such an asset to have in a Formula One team, a driver like that. He's calm, he's generally fairly measured, and as I said, consistent. Oh, it's a spin from Hamilton. Yeah,
there was a yellow flag out in Sector 2, and it is for Lewis Hamilton, who is, we're just seeing the end of it. He's back on the road, but his tyres are certainly covered in all sorts of muck. No damage that we can see on the Mercedes as he crawls down towards turn 12. So he's come a cropper somewhere between 9 and 10, and I think we're about to get a look at it. So he makes his way through the chicane. Let's have a listen.
Oh, that was very strange. It was very strange because he came through. It's a sort of fast left-hander, then a right-hander. Wasn't going that fast. Looked like he backed off even, and still lost grip. Oh, there's dirt all over the circuit. That's what there is.
Yeah, but he's only dipped, well, I suppose the two left-hand side wheels. I think he's just gone a little bit wide coming through the right-hander, and that's been enough to spin him round.
I wonder if someone else has dragged dirt onto the circuit, because it looks like there was dust and dirt right across the racing line, and I think he stepped onto that, lost all grip, because it was a sort of relatively slow speed spin and quite un-Lewis Hamilton-like, but I think that was it.
We've just got a magnificent shot as well of Lewis Hamilton in the cockpit. And it's not often in the daylight races you can see a clear visor and see the whites of the driver's eyes, but we got a brilliant shot there of Lewis Hamilton in full concentration mode, looking at the next corner ahead, pre-spin, and then he was looking in the wrong direction. But he did pick up a lot of dirt there, so he will make his way back to the pits. Indeed, he has done, with just over 4 minutes remain. A little bit busy towards the end of the pit lane. Couple of practice starts being done on the right-hand side of the pit lane entry by the RB of Sonoda, and Oscar Piastri's McLaren coming back out for a final dose before we head into qualifying. Who do you think's struggling, Mark? Who do you think's under pressure here? Perez put the soft tyre on and went 13th fastest, so he didn't light up the tyres, but remember, he hasn't got all the bits and bobs that Red Bull have brought this weekend. I think Aston Martin are not looking brilliant.
No, I mean, they haven't looked brilliant for a while now, and I think what's happening is that the midfield teams around them are doing a pretty decent job. Williams, Albon's currently in 7th. Williams doing a fairly decent job. The Haas cars have been consistently now right up in that mix, and even ahead of the likes of the Aston Martins on a regular basis. Now, you wouldn't have said that at the start of the season. So all of this is putting pressure. The RBs as well, having a good day. Ricciardo currently 6th, Tsunoda 9th. So inside the top 10 as things stand. That's all putting pressure on the likes of Aston Martin. They are ones that have been left behind in a bit of a development race and need to up their game. I think you can look at the Ferraris and say they're clearly not in the fight at the moment, it looks like, with the front runners. Red Bull, we haven't seen a full picture of, I don't think. Perez has been perennial struggler over the last couple of years or so. Verstappen, I'm sure, will be in the mix. So it's very difficult to call. At the very front, McLaren, particularly in the hands of Norris, but Piastri not far behind, and Verstappen, I think, are going to be close, as they have been over the last couple of rounds. And you can't write off a Mercedes. They've won the last 2 races, slightly cooler conditions favouring them. This is anybody's game.
Yeah, it is. It is. How brilliant is that? Air temperature, you're right, it is a bit cooler. 26.8 degrees is the air temperature. Track temperature, 37.5 degrees as well. Fair bit of cloud cover over the Hungarian. We're about 12 miles northeast of Budapest in a bit of a natural bowl, which is where this circuit lies. A circuit that's been on the calendar since 1986 every year. Really is a bit of a mainstay. It has 7 different configurations. This one, though, that we're currently on with 14 turns, 6 to the left and 8 to the right, proving to have been the popular one of choice over the last several years. Joe Guan Yu on the radio.
Staying here, slow in.
Being told to stay in gear, slow in.
That's not a good message. What that means is they've either lost something like hydraulic pressure. They don't want him to change gear, because if he changes gear, it's going to cause some damage. So they're asking him to stay in the same gear, roll it into the pit lane where they can get it back in, hopefully prevent any major issues in terms of damage. But they've now got just a couple of hours really to get that car apart, fix whatever issue it is. Hopefully it's an easy one. If it's hydraulic pressure, maybe there's a leak, maybe it just needs the system repressurizing, but let's hope it's nothing more serious than that.
Yeah, Sauber with a decent upgrade here this weekend. Side pod, engine cover, floor, rear corner, rear suspension, halo, mirror, headrest. They really have brought quite a few bits, and Joe Guan Yu has made it back to the pits and into his garage where the team are now assessing that Sauber. He qualified 5th here last year. His career best, as both Saubers were unstoppable. He had an issue. Oh, big lock-up from Max Verstappen going into turn 1 on a quick lap on the soft tyre, and that front right has taken an absolute pounding flat spot, and it's picked up quite a lot of marbling too in the runoff area as he rejoins into turn 2.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't ideal. That was his one last shot at really seeing what the Red Bull could do on the soft tyres with low fuel ahead of qualifying. The next opportunity he'll get will, of course, be qualifying this afternoon. He'll complete his run now, he'll complete his lap, because they all need to be out on track as the checkered flag just comes out now to do their practice starts. Just going back to that sort of list of upgrades that you talked about from Joe with the Sauber, it sounded like you'd just been on a shopping spree at a car accessories shop, didn't it? Halo, headrest, fluffy dice.
I'll grab the mirror as well. Why not? It's 2 for 1. They have brought quite a lot. Well, Sauber, I mean, the only team yet to score a point, really, and it's looking a bit dire for them. Valtteri Bottas, 21st in the Drivers' Championship, plumb last. His best result has been 12th this year. Joe Guan Yu is ahead because he's had a couple of 11th place finishes. It's trouble down at Sauber as they try and find a way forward. Nico Hülkenberg joins the team next year. We think both drivers will be out of the seat come the end of the season as they get ready for their transformation into Audi for 2026. Let's see if that bears the fruits that so many want it to. But as you said, Mark, checkered flag is out. And it's once again Lando Norris who is at the top of the times. McLaren looking strong here, but it is practice and we won't know the full competitive order until qualifying a little later on. But it's Norris ahead of Piastri, less than half a tenth between the two McLaren drivers. Norris's fastest lap time, a 1:16.098. Max Verstappen third, but a mistake on his final lap. Did he have more in the tank in his Red Bull? Russell fourth. Carlos Sainz rounding out the top 5. Good lap from Daniel Ricciardo to get the RB in 6th. Alex Albon ahead of Hülkenberg. Tsunoda and Hamilton make up the top 10. Hamilton with a spin after coming across quite a lot of dirt and grub on the racing line through turn 9. He made it back to the pits. Charles Leclerc 11th ahead of Bottas. Sergio Perez, both Red Bulls doing a lot of data gathering this session with that huge upgrade, splitting the upgrades across both cars. Perez 13th. Alonso is 14th ahead of Lance Stroll. Logan Sargent 16th. Joe Guan Yu 17th. Pierre Gasly, Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon in the Alpine makes it 20th and last. Mark, then, prediction ahead of qualifying later on this afternoon, if you dare, for pole position? Well, we've got to do it.
Yeah, the great thing is we don't know, and that's not me sitting on the fence for once. That is because the times are so close. I think if I was going to put my my money on somebody, I might still say Verstappen. We haven't seen it yet, but the lap I saw him do, there was clearly more time in it. So that is still something that's still hidden behind a veil. We've seen what Norris has got. I'm sure there'll be a tiny bit more from him as well when it really matters in qualifying. It's going to be close. I'd say between Norris and Verstappen, as we've seen recently, I would put my money on Verstappen.
Okay, I'm going to go with Piastri. I'm going to put my money on Piastri and we'll see what happens. But that is it for practice. Now it starts to really gear up ahead of qualifying, which you can listen right here on the BBC Sport website and app. Will be on air from 5 to 2 this afternoon. 5 to 3, I should say, this afternoon, ahead of the session starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon for qualifying. We hope you can join us there. My thanks to Mark Priestley, to Andrew Benson as well, and the whole team. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.